Hello and welcome. We often think about what makes a community strong. Is it its power? Is it its piety? But what if the real test is how it handles both at the same time? In this explainer, we're going to dive into 5 incredibly potent verses from the Qur'an, Surah At-Tawbah, that get right to the heart of this.
So these verses ask a huge question. How do you really see a community's true character? It's a deep dive into integrity, into faith and resilience. It's not just about what people say they believe, but about how they actually behave, especially when the pressure's on.
And the answer these verses give is fascinating. It's like a 2-part diagnostic. A community's character comes out when it's dealing with threats from the outside, sure, but just as importantly, it's revealed by how it handles tests of faith on the inside. You could think of it as a kind of spiritual stress test.
All right, so let's tackle that first challenge, the outer defense. The verses get into this need for a community to be firm, to protect itself, but, and this is crucial, to also be righteous in how it does it.
So the first verse we're looking at, 9:132, it gives a very practical, very specific instruction. It tells believers to engage with those who are adjacent to you. Now the key words there are immediate and hostile. This isn't some blanket call for aggression against everyone. It's about defending the community from very real, very close threats, the ones right on your doorstep. The verse uses this really powerful Arabic word, ghilza. Now, you might see it translated as harshness, but in this very specific context, it's about a necessary firmness. It's the kind of resolve you need for an effective defense. It's not about being cruel or starting a fight. It's about having the strength to protect your people from harm. Think resolve, not rage.
And this right here is the core distinction. The verse is calling for a righteous firmness, a strength that has principles. It is absolutely not a green light for unbounded cruelty. There's a clear, moral line in the sand, and that's central to the whole idea.
And just to make sure that point lands, the verse ends with this incredibly powerful statement, and know that Allah is with the righteous. Wow. That completely reframes everything, doesn't it? This isn't just about military tactics anymore. It becomes a moral duty, something that has to be rooted in God consciousness, or taqwa.
Okay, so that's the external test. But then the verses do this brilliant pivot, turning the lens inward to a challenge that's maybe even more intense. They show how new revelation, new guidance, acts like a litmus test for the heart. It reveals the true spiritual state of every single person who hears it.
And the verses capture this dynamic so perfectly. When a new chapter, a new surah comes down, the hypocrites among the people ask this question. But you could just hear the sarcasm, right? Which of you has this increased in faith? It's a cynical jab, an attempt to undermine the message's spiritual power before it even has a chance.
But what's so fascinating is that this cynical question actually sets the stage for a brilliant psychological breakdown. The verses show us that when people are faced with divine truth, there are basically 3 different ways they can react. Let's walk through them. First up, you have the believers. For them, a new revelation is a reason to celebrate. It's not a new burden, it's a gift. It actually deepens their faith, it strengthens their connection, and as the verse says, they rejoice. Simple as that. Then you have the second group, those described as having a disease in their hearts. Now for them, revelation has the complete opposite effect. It doesn't heal them. Instead, it's like an accelerant. It takes the envy and corruption that's already there and just makes it worse, adding, as the verse puts it so starkly, evil to their evil. And finally, we have the hypocrites. Their reaction isn't just an internal problem. It's all about active evasion. It's defined by that mockery we just talked about, by cynicism, and ultimately by looking for the nearest exit. They just want to get away from the message. I mean, the Qur'an paints such a vivid picture of this. They're looking around at each other, whispering nervously, "Does anyone see you?" It's this paranoid, calculated moment. They're terrified of being identified with the believers, of being associated with this new, challenging truth.
And that nervous glance is immediately followed by action. They don't stick around to argue. They don't engage. They just slip away. It's a physical retreat from the truth they can't handle.
So this whole slipping away thing, it makes you wonder, right? Why does God even let this happen? Well, the verses suggest it's not random at all. It's actually part of what you could call a divine classroom, where life's trials are the curriculum, designed to help us grow. And the Qur'an is incredibly specific about this. It asks, almost with a sense of wonder, do they not see that they are tried every year, once or twice? Just think about that.
Not one big dramatic trial, but regular recurring tests. It's a consistent, ongoing process.
So what's the point of these tests? Well, the verses are very clear. They're opportunities. They're designed to be little wake-up calls, moments to get us to repent, to remember God, to course correct. They're basically open invitations to turn back.
But here's the tragedy that the verse really laments. For those with hardened hearts, for the ones who keep choosing to slip away, the lesson just never sinks in. The test is failed, and that opportunity for growth is completely wasted. It's like the bell is ringing for class, but they're not even in the building.
So when we put all these pieces together, what's the big picture? What's the ultimate takeaway from these verses about community, about faith, and about guidance?
Well, when you boil it all down, 3 core principles really emerge. And together, they form this compact but really profound guide to understanding the spiritual health of a community, and maybe our own too.
First, practical security and a spiritual posture are inseparable. A community has to defend itself with firmness, absolutely, but that strength has to be guided by taqwa, by God consciousness. True strength isn't just raw power, it's principled power.
Second, revelation is a powerful diagnostic tool. That litmus test idea is key. It doesn't change what's inside a person's heart, it just reveals it, for better or for worse. It shows us that our reaction to the truth says a lot more about us than it does about the truth itself.
And finally, divine guidance is a teaching process. Life's trials are the curriculum, and they repeat to give us every possible chance to learn. But, and this is a big but, the verses also give us stark warning. If we consistently choose to slip away, that guidance can be withdrawn. The door to the classroom stays open, but only if you're willing to stay inside.
So we're left with this really powerful final thought. These verses basically frame truth itself as a kind of mirror, and that leads to a profound question for every single one of us. If truth is a mirror, what does it force us to see when we look into it? What does it reveal about us? That's what these verses really want us to think about. Thanks so much for joining me.